Hello there, and welcome back to this quiet little corner where we let wonder stretch its legs and science sit close by the fire. Tonight's question is one that lives somewhere between poetry and physics. It's the kind of thought that slips into your mind when you're watching a storm roll in, when thunder feels less like sound and more like a heartbeat from the ground beneath you. The question is this: could weather be a form of the planet's emotions? At first, that sounds fanciful. Emotions belong to people, maybe to animals. Bees dancing in joy, elephants mourning their dead. Weather, we're told, is just air pressure, temperature, sunlight, and moisture all interacting in chaotic but ultimately mechanical ways. Storm systems aren't angry. Droughts aren't sad. Snowfalls aren't moments of peace. Or are they? If you pause the scientific explanations for a moment and look at the world with older eyes, the connection starts to make sense. Across cultures, weather has always been given personality. Rain as tears, thunder as anger, gentle winds as whispers of affection. Ancient peoples didn't simply describe weather in human terms. They lived as though the sky itself was feeling. Crops depended on those moods. Survival depended on listening. And yet, maybe those metaphors weren't just poetic. Maybe they were an early way of recognizing a truth science is only now circling back toward: that the Earth doesn't just host life. It behaves like something alive. The Gaia hypothesis, proposed by James Lovelock in the 1970s, suggested that the entire planet acts like a single organism, maintaining balance in ways that almost seem intentional. If that's true, then why not consider weather as more than mechanics? Why not think of it as expression? Picture it this way: a storm gathers not only because of heat and air, but also because the planet is responding. Not consciously, not like us with words and choices, but in a deeper rhythm. When the seas warm, hurricanes grow stronger. When forests vanish, droughts follow. When we fill the air with greenhouse gases, storms answer with new intensity. If emotions are reactions, signals of imbalance, joy, grief, or stress, then couldn't these weather shifts be the Earth's version of that? Think of how your own body works. When you're overheated, you sweat. When you're frightened, your pulse quickens. When you've been wounded, your skin inflames. None of those are deliberate decisions. They're automatic, but they're also deeply connected to how you feel. Could weather be something similar on the scale of a planet? An atmosphere that shivers, sighs, or storms as part of its ongoing life. This doesn't mean Earth feels sad in the way you and I do, but maybe sadness, at its root, is just a body's way of saying something's wrong, something needs tending. In that sense, perhaps weather is Earth's language of sensation. And maybe we've been reading it all along, only now we call it climate data instead of myth, feedback loops instead of moods. So as you sit there listening, think about the last time the rain fell against your window or the wind roared through the trees. What if, instead of randomness, it was the planet speaking in a voice too large for words? A voice we once heard as myth, and now study as science. A voice that might not be so different from emotion after all. Would you like me to take the next part of the story deeper into how different cultures interpreted weather as moods of the Earth, or into the modern scientific parallels that make this idea more than just metaphor? Let's step a little deeper into this idea by traveling through the ways people across time have listened to weather as if it were the voice of the Earth. Long before satellites tracked hurricanes or Doppler radar painted rain across our screens, humans looked up at the sky and felt something personal looking back. In Greece, thunder was Zeus, anger cracking through the heavens. In Norse stories, storms were Thor's hammer striking the sky. In the Pacific Islands, rain wasn't just water, it was a blessing, a form of nourishment sent by ancestors who still lingered in the clouds. Among many Native American traditions, winds carried not only air but also messages, signs of change, sometimes warnings, sometimes gifts. Weather wasn't just background, it was presence. And here's what's striking: these weren't just decorative myths. They shaped behavior. Farmers sowed seeds with rituals of gratitude to invite gentle rains. Travelers read wind shifts as guidance. Communities treated floods or droughts not just as accidents but as communication. Something had gone out of balance between people and land, and the sky was reminding them. Now, science might call that superstition. But pause for a second. If emotions are the body's way of signaling imbalance or harmony, then those old interpretations were not so different from what science is now rediscovering. When we see increased storms after deforestation, or more extreme droughts after soil is stripped bare, we're recognizing the same link. The planet responds. Consider how the language of weather already edges toward emotion, even in modern science. We say angry skies, gentle rains, temperatures rising. We feel unease in the stillness before a storm, relief in the coolness after it breaks. That's not just poetic indulgence, it's embodied experience. Our nervous systems read weather as though it carries mood. And maybe that's not just projection. Maybe our bodies, being part of Earth, are tuned to hear its signals in ways science is only beginning to translate. Imagine standing in a desert as heat presses down without mercy. No clouds, no relief. Feels harsh, demanding. Now picture a foggy morning where sound softens, outlines blur, and the world seems contemplative, almost thoughtful. These aren't random impressions. They're emotional responses to atmospheric states. But what if they're also reflections? Our emotions syncing with the Earth's expressions, like instruments resonating to the same note. In some Aboriginal Australian traditions, storms are not destructive events but parts of the songlines of the land. Patterns that keep the world alive. In Japanese Shinto belief, kami, spirits, inhabit natural forces, including wind and rain. To greet the storm with respect was to recognize that the planet was not silent. Across continents, the message is consistent. Weather is more than weather. It is relationship. So here's the thought. Perhaps those early cultures weren't naive. Perhaps they were perceiving something real but describing it with the tools they had: story, ritual, metaphor. Just as a fever isn't just heat but the body's way of communicating, maybe weather is Earth's way of speaking. And if that's true, then the next question becomes, what exactly is it trying to say? Would you like the next part to explore how science today interprets storms, droughts, and winds in ways that strangely echo these old myths? Or should we wander further through cultural stories first before circling back to modern parallels? Let's shift now into the world of science, because while myths and rituals painted the skies with gods and spirits, modern research has begun to uncover patterns that make those old interpretations feel strangely familiar. Weather, we now know, is not random chaos. It is the visible surface of vast systems, and those systems often behave like something alive. Take storms, for instance. When the ocean warms beyond a certain point, hurricanes emerge. They don't just appear out of nowhere. They gather, grow, and travel with something like intention. Scientists describe them as feeding on heat, breathing through eye walls, strengthening or weakening, depending on conditions. Listen closely to that language. It sounds less like machinery and more like biology. A storm is born, it matures, it dies. It has a life cycle. If emotions are the body's weather, waves of chemistry and reaction, then perhaps storms are the Earth's emotions, rising from imbalance, then releasing energy until calm returns. Or think about drought. In medical terms, drought resembles stress. It happens when resources are depleted faster than they can be restored. The land cracks, plants weaken, rivers shrink. The earth looks strained, stretched thin, much like a human under pressure. Scientists measure this in rainfall totals and soil moisture, but the imagery is unmistakable. A body without enough water is weary. A planet without enough rain shows the same fatigue. And then there is wind. Invisible, shapeless, yet endlessly expressive. In physics, wind is simply air moving from high pressure to low. But in experience, it carries character. A stillness before a storm can feel tense, like held breath. A sudden gust feels abrupt, impatient. A steady breeze across a meadow feels playful, even joyful. The difference is just speed, temperature, and direction. But to us, it resonates like mood. Perhaps that's not just projection but participation. We, being part of Earth, are attuned to the emotional textures of its atmosphere. Even clouds, the quiet, drifting background of our days, resemble thoughts. They form, dissolve, gather, and release, endlessly shifting. Sometimes they're scattered and light, sometimes heavy and brooding, sometimes absent altogether. Watching them can feel like watching the sky think. Neuroscientists sometimes describe thoughts as weather in the mind. Passing storms, bright clearings, hazy fogs. Could it be that weather itself is thought, but on a planetary scale? The Gaia hypothesis gives us a framework for this. James Lovelock proposed that Earth functions like a self-regulating organism. If oxygen rises too high, plants and microbes adjust. If carbon builds up, oceans absorb it. If temperatures climb, ice and vegetation shift to balance them. This is not randomness. This is response. If a thermostat counts as awareness, measuring, adjusting, maintaining, then how different is Earth's climate system? And if response is at the heart of emotion, then weather is its visible language. We're used to thinking of the Earth as background scenery. Oceans, clouds, winds, storms. But what if these aren't just stage effects? What if they are signals? If you watch carefully, weather always carries meaning. A sudden downpour after weeks of dryness isn't just an event. It's relief. A violent storm after heat isn't just mechanics. It's release. Here's the unsettling part. Many of today's extremes look like expressions of distress. Stronger hurricanes, longer droughts, harsher heat waves. They're all part of what climate science calls feedback loops. But to think of them as emotions reframes the picture. It makes the Earth less a machine breaking down and more a being crying out, gasping, trying to rebalance under strain. And so the old myths return, in new language. Where once we said, the gods are angry, now we say, the system is destabilizing. The difference might only be vocabulary. The experience, the sense of a planet expressing itself, remains the same. Would you like me to continue by exploring more of these scientific, emotional parallels, like how floods resemble grief and renewal? Or would you prefer the next step to wander back into human stories of how people responded emotionally to these planetary moods? Let's wander back for a moment into the human stories. The ways people across time have stood beneath the sky and treated weather not as background noise, but as dialogue. Because when you listen closely, weather has never just been weather. It has always been relationship. Consider ancient Egypt. The flooding of the Nile wasn't seen as random chance. It was the breath of the gods, a pulse of life through the land. Too much water and it was anger. too little and it was sorrow. But when it came just right, it was joy, the earth smiling, providing abundance. Those annual floods were more than irrigation. They were emotional exchanges between the people and their planet. In the Andes, farmers still make offerings to Pachamama, Mother Earth. Rainfall is read not only as climate, but as reciprocity. If the land is respected, rain comes kindly. If it is disrespected, storms may punish or withhold. To outsiders, that may sound like superstition, but underneath is a recognition that weather responds. Maybe not in the way humans do, but in the way all living systems do, through feedback, adjustment, expression. Think of the monsoon in India, a season that is not simply meteorological but spiritual, emotional, cultural. Its arrival is celebrated in poetry and festivals. Its delay brings anxiety, its absence despair. The monsoon is not weather. It is mood, collective, shared, bigger than any one person yet felt in every heart. Or consider the Arctic, where the Inuit read the sky with an intimacy that turns weather into language. Shifts in wind direction, the shape of clouds, the color of ice, these aren't just conditions. They're signs, moods, voices. In their stories, storms are not accidents. They are presences, beings with temperaments that can be approached with respect or ignored at one's peril. Even today, in a world dominated by forecasts and satellite maps, people still speak of the sky emotionally. We say, the weather turned against us. We describe a summer as kind or a winter as cruel. We talk about angry storms and gentle rains. That vocabulary isn't just habit, it's intuition. It reveals how deeply our nervous system sense weather as something alive, something expressive. And here's the bridge. Those emotional readings weren't just metaphorical survival tools. They were survival itself. By treating the weather as mood, people paid attention. They noticed patterns, respected rhythms, and adjusted their behavior. The rain was late. Perhaps a ritual of gratitude was missing. The storm was fierce. Perhaps balance had been broken. These responses may look symbolic, but they encoded practical truths. Conserve water, change planting schedules, move herds. Emotion and ecology weren't separate. They were woven together. So when we ask, could weather be the planet's emotions? We're not inventing a new idea. We're circling back to something ancient, something humans once accepted as obvious, that to live well is to be in relationship with the moods of the sky. And maybe that's what we've lost. By stripping weather down to numbers and forecasts, we've forgotten that it still speaks to us. Its moods still shape our moods. Its storms still unsettle us. Its calms still soothe us. The question is whether we're willing to listen, not just for prediction, but for meaning. Would you like me to carry the next part into how our emotions mirror weather? Grief as rain, anger as storms, joy as sunshine, or move toward how modern climate change might be read as the planet entering an emotional crisis? Let's take that mirror and hold it up, our emotions beside the planet's weather. Because when you start to notice, the parallels aren't just poetic. They're uncanny. Think about grief. When we grieve, tears fall. Our bodies carry sorrow as water, flowing until some balance is restored. Now picture rain. Not the quiet drizzle you barely notice, but the downpour that soaks streets, fills rivers, and flushes away dust. Isn't it the same? A release, a letting go, a cleansing? In many cultures, rain has been seen as the earth weeping, not in weakness, but in renewal. Grief, whether human or planetary, makes room for life to continue. Now take anger. In us it builds as heat. The pulse quickens, the breath shortens, the face flushes. If it's not released, it erupts. And in the sky, thunderheads tower, lightning flashes, winds howl, and rain crashes down. A storm doesn't last forever, but while it rages, everything around it feels its intensity. Anger, whether human or atmospheric, is energy demanding recognition. What about joy? In us, it feels like lightness, warmth, clarity. In weather, it looks like those golden days when the air is crisp, the sky clear, and the world feels wide open. People say the sun came out as if it's a metaphor, but isn't that exactly how joy feels inside us? A kind of internal sunrise. Even anxiety has its weather. A heavy, humid day when storms hover just out of sight, when the air feels tight, waiting. That's the body in anticipation, bracing for what might come. The same tension hangs in both air and chest. And then, when the storm finally breaks, so does the anxiety. The relief is shared. Psychologists often describe emotions as waves of energy moving through the body. Meteorologists describe weather patterns the same way. Waves of heat, waves of pressure, waves of moisture. Perhaps that's not a coincidence. Perhaps emotions are weather on a human scale, and weather is emotion on a planetary scale. Both are ways that living systems express imbalance, transition, and renewal. Here's another thought. Emotions, like weather, aren't optional. You don't choose to feel grief any more than the sky chooses to rain. They arise, they pass, they return. They're part of being alive. If Earth is, in some way, alive, then its atmosphere, the restless, shifting skin around it, might be its emotional life. Not conscious, not deliberate, but deeply expressive. And this makes climate change feel different. Because if weather is Earth's emotional language, then today's extremes aren't just data points. They're cries, outbursts, breakdowns. Hurricanes growing more violent, wildfires fueled by heat, droughts that stretch on like despair. These might be signs that the Earth is entering a kind of emotional crisis. Not punishment, not revenge, but stress, strain, imbalance expressed in the only language it has, weather. Which leaves us with a question that's harder than science alone. If the planet is expressing distress, what responsibility do we have to listen? Shall I continue by exploring how our own emotional health is tied to weather? Why sunlight lifts us, storms unsettle us, or move further into the idea of climate change as the Earth's version of emotional turbulence? Let's linger now on how deeply our own emotions are tied to weather, as if the sky and our inner worlds are playing the same song in different keys. Consider sunlight. When the sun breaks through after days of gray, something shifts inside. Shoulders loosen, moods brighten, laughter comes easier. Doctors even prescribe light therapy for depression, because our biology is tuned to the rhythms of the sky. The hormone melatonin, which makes us sleepy, drops when light returns. Serotonin, the happiness chemical, rises. In other words, the sun doesn't just warm our skin, it warms our spirit. Now think of storms. For some, they're unsettling, the crash of thunder, the unpredictability of wind. For others, storms bring exhilaration, a rush of adrenaline, as if the Earth's anger stirs something primal in us too. In both cases, we respond emotionally to atmospheric shifts, not by choice but by resonance. Fog is another quiet example. Walk into a foggy morning and notice how your mind changes. The world feels hushed, muffled, mysterious. It slows you down, turns thoughts inward. People often describe fog as dreamlike, and isn't that exactly what it does to consciousness? It blurs edges, both in landscape and in thought. Snow, meanwhile, has a mood all its own. When it falls gently, it hushes the world. Streets grow quiet, colors soften, even time itself feels slower. For many, snow carries nostalgia, a childlike joy. For others, it brings isolation, heaviness. Either way, the sky is shaping how we feel, not abstractly but tangibly. This isn't just poetic intuition, it's measurable. Seasonal affective disorder shows how mood dips in winter when light is scarce. Hot weather is linked to higher aggression rates, as if heat itself irritates. After natural disasters, anxiety and depression often rise, echoing the turbulence of the storm itself. The Earth's moods ripple into ours. And maybe that's the key. We don't just observe weather. We participate in it. Our bodies, made of water and air, respond to the same cycles. When the barometric pressure drops before a storm, some people feel headaches, fatigue, even joint pain. When humidity rises, our breath changes. The line between outside and inside is thinner than we think. It might be no coincidence that so many cultures described humans as children of the earth. If the planet has emotions expressed through weather, then we, too, inherit those rhythms. We are, in a sense, the micro-weather of Earth, our feelings the local storms and clearings of a greater sky. So when we ask whether weather is the Earth's emotions, maybe the better question is this: what if our emotions are weather? Temporary, shifting, inevitable. What if to understand ourselves, we should look at the sky? And if that's true, then the turbulence of today's climate isn't just planetary, it's personal. The storms outside and the storms within may not be so different, which leads us to a deeper, more unsettling thought. If Earth is in distress, how might that distress be moving through us as well? Would you like me to continue by following this thread? How collective human mood seems to echo climate instability? Or would you prefer to step back into the larger cosmic perspective, asking whether planets elsewhere might also feel through their weather? Let's follow that thread. How the collective human mood might be echoing the planet's climate instability. Because lately, haven't you noticed? It feels like both the Earth and its people are restless, overheated, unsettled. Think about the news cycle. It's storm after storm, fire after fire, flood after flood. Anxiety climbs not only because of the disasters themselves, but because of what they symbolize: a world out of balance. And just as the skies grow more turbulent, so too does our emotional climate. Rates of depression, burnout, even rage are rising across the globe. People speak of living in unprecedented times, of feeling constantly on edge. It's as if the atmosphere outside and the atmosphere inside are caught in feedback loops with each other. There's even science hinting at this connection. Researchers studying eco-anxiety find that extreme weather events leave psychological imprints long after the skies clear. Survivors of hurricanes often report nightmares of water or wind. Drought-stricken farmers describe feelings of exhaustion, as though their own resilience dries up with the soil. And even those untouched by disaster feel a low hum of unease, a sense that the earth itself is unsettled, and therefore, so are we. It's not just metaphor, it's biology. Our nervous systems evolved in tune with the rhythms of the planet. For most of human history, our moods rose with the sun, quieted with dusk, aligned with seasons. Now, with climate instability, those rhythms are shifting. Longer summers, harsher winters, unpredictable rains. Our bodies register these changes as dissonance, like a song gone off key. And maybe that's why so much of our emotional language borrows from weather. We say storm of anger, cloud of sadness, sunny disposition. We don't just describe ourselves that way, we feel ourselves that way. Our hearts race like lightning. Our thoughts swirl like cyclones. Our tears fall like rain. Perhaps the language exists because the kinship is real. Some philosophers suggest that consciousness itself may not be an isolated spark in the brain, but a shared field, influenced by the world around us. If that's true, then maybe our rising collective unease isn't only about politics, technology, or culture. Maybe it's also about resonance. The planet is distressed, and we, as its children, feel that distress humming in our bones. And here's a thought both hopeful and haunting. If human emotions echo Earth's weather, then perhaps healing can flow both ways. When we restore balance to the land, we might restore balance within ourselves. When we cool the planet, maybe we calm the collective heart. It raises a question worth sitting with. Are we simply mirrors of Earth's moods, or are we also participants, capable of easing or worsening them? And if weather is the planet's emotion, what role do we play in shaping its emotional life? Should we continue next by exploring whether human actions act like triggers for Earth's moods, the way stress can trigger emotional outbursts in us, or turn outward, imagining whether other planet storms and skies might also be their own strange forms of feeling? Let's stay with the idea of human actions as triggers for Earth's moods. Because if weather is the planet's emotional language, then we have to admit, we've been pressing its buttons. Think of the body under stress. Too little rest, too much pressure, and soon enough it lashes out. Headaches, fevers, exhaustion. Earth seems to be doing something similar. We cut down forests, and droughts deepen. We pump carbon into the sky, and hurricanes strengthen. We poison rivers, and floods grow unpredictable. These aren't just mechanical effects. They're reactions, the way a body reacts to imbalance. Consider wildfires. In some ecosystems, fire is a natural part of renewal. But with rising heat and human interference, fires now burn hotter, longer, and more destructively. It's as if the planet is running a fever, burning off what it can't regulate. Fever in a human isn't just temperature. It's a signal. Something is wrong. Wildfires may be the Earth's fever, its way of saying the same. Or think about floods. On one level, they're physics. Too much rain, too little drainage. But on another level, they resemble tears overflowing. Communities swept away, landscapes reshaped, all from excess the earth can't hold. Like grief, floods cleanse. But when grief is overwhelming, it drowns. Heat waves might be the closest thing to panic. A body in panic overheats, breathes fast, sweats, struggles to cool itself. The planet, trapped by greenhouse gases, is doing the same. Its oceans absorbing heat, its ice caps melting like beads of sweat. Panic isn't sustainable in a person, nor is it in a planet. And then there's the silence that comes after. The eerie calm in the eye of a hurricane, or the stillness after a storm has torn through. Survivors often describe that silence as unsettling, almost worse than the chaos. In psychology, that's what happens after breakdown too. The numb quiet, the pause before repair begins. The parallels are hard to ignore. But here's where it turns. Just as people can learn to soothe themselves, Earth, too, has resilience. Forests regrow. Rivers find new paths. Skies clear. Left alone, The planet tends toward healing, but we're not leaving it alone. Our actions keep pressing, keep provoking, keep destabilizing. Imagine someone trying to rest while being constantly poked awake. That's what we're doing to Earth's emotional balance. So the question becomes, are we aggravating a planetary mind, or are we part of that mind itself? Cells in its body, impulses in its nervous system? If the latter, then maybe the storms aren't Earth lashing out at us. Maybe they're Earth's way of processing us, its attempt to metabolize the disturbance we've created, which is unsettling, because it suggests we're not just witnesses to Earth's emotions. We're participants in them. We help create them. And if that's true, then perhaps the emotional turbulence of our time is not just about climate, it's about communication between a planet and its people. So here's the thought for tonight. When the storm rises, is it Earth shouting at us, or is it Earth shouting through us? Should I continue next by exploring whether this idea reframes natural disasters as conversations rather than punishments, or move toward how other planets' weather might reveal their own emotional states? Let's stay with that idea, that natural disasters might not be punishments but conversations. Because what if storms, floods, and droughts aren't the Earth's way of striking against us, but of speaking to us? And maybe the tragedy is not that the Earth is angry, but that we've forgotten how to listen. Think about how communication works in our own lives. When a person cries, it isn't always an accusation. Sometimes it's simply a need. Comfort me, notice me, help me. When someone shouts, it's often frustration at not being heard. The Earth might be doing the same. A flood isn't vengeance. It's overflow. A wildfire isn't cruelty. It's a flare, a signal. A drought isn't spite. It's depletion made visible. Across cultures, this idea isn't new. Indigenous traditions often treated disasters not as punishment from the sky, but as reminders of relationship. A storm that destroyed a harvest wasn't the God smiting us, but a sign that balance had been broken. Something in the relationship between humans and land needed mending. That interpretation didn't erase the suffering, but it framed it with meaning. Instead of random cruelty, it was conversation. In the modern world, though, we've lost that framing. We measure, we model, we forecast, but rarely do we ask, what is this event saying? Maybe that's why disasters feel so senseless now. Without the idea of dialogue, they're just chaos. But if we restore that lens, we might find new ways of responding, not just rebuilding what was lost, but listening to what was revealed. Consider the earthquake and tsunami in Japan in 2011. Beyond the devastation, survivors spoke of a new humility, a renewed respect for the sea. In their words, you could hear an older worldview surfacing, that the ocean had spoken, reminding them of its power. Or after Hurricane Katrina, many in New Orleans said the storm exposed not just weak levees but weak social systems, deep inequalities that had been ignored. In that sense, the storm wasn't only destruction, it was revelation. And isn't that what conversation often does? It reveals what was hidden. It brings unspoken tensions to the surface. Disasters might function in the same way. Planetary expressions that force us to see what we'd rather not. Floods show us where we've paved over wetlands. Fires show us how dry we've let forests become. Storms show us how vulnerable our cities are. The Earth is not punishing, it's pointing. But here's the haunting possibility. What if the planet has always been speaking, and only now, as the volume rises, are we straining to hear? What if climate change is not Earth losing control, but Earth raising its voice? In that frame, Every weather event becomes less an accident and more a sentence in a conversation. Some sentences are gentle, a breeze reminding us of change. Some are urgent, a hurricane demanding attention. And like any dialogue, the question is not whether Earth is speaking, but whether we're willing to answer. So maybe the next time thunder shakes the windows or rain soaks the soil, the question isn't, what caused this? But also, what is this saying? Would you like me to continue by unfolding how ancient rituals were essentially ways of replying to the planet's moods, or step into how modern science might also serve as a form of listening to Earth's voice? Let's step into how rituals, ancient and modern, might actually be our ways of replying to the planet's moods. Because if weather is Earth speaking, then surely humans, for as long as we've walked beneath the sky, have tried to answer back. In many early cultures, rain dances weren't just hopeful gestures. They were conversations, movements, songs, offerings, ways of saying, "We see you, we hear you, we are asking, respectfully, for balance." When drought broke and rain returned, it wasn't just relief. It was relationship restored. The same goes for offerings left by rivers. To some, they might look like superstition, flowers, food, incense drifting on the water. But underneath it was communication. People giving something back, even symbolically, as if to say, "We remember this is not a one-way exchange. We take, but we also return." That gesture turned weather into dialogue instead of demand. Even architecture has carried this impulse. Temples aligned with the solstices, cities built to capture winds, homes designed to welcome light. These weren't only engineering feats. They were responses to the moods of the sky, ways of harmonizing human life with the rhythms above. Fast forward to now. We like to think we've left those rituals behind. But haven't we simply changed their form? Today, science itself has become a kind of ritual, a way of listening to Earth's voice in numbers, models, and measurements. Satellites scan clouds, buoys track ocean heat, stations log winds. All of it is humanity leaning in, trying to hear the conversation more clearly. And policy, messy, imperfect though it is our attempt at reply. Emissions treaties, conservation laws, renewable energy. These are modern offerings, gestures of reciprocity. We no longer leave grain for the river spirit, but we build wetlands to help the river breathe again. The shape of the ritual changes, but the intent is not so different. What's striking is that both ancient rituals and modern science are built on the same recognition. Weather isn't random noise. It's signal. And when signals grow urgent, as with today's storms, droughts, and fires, the reply must grow urgent too. The tragedy is not that Earth is speaking harshly. The tragedy would be to remain silent in return. This raises a tender question. What would it mean to live as if every weather pattern were part of an ongoing conversation? Would we walk more gently, speak more carefully, act more attentively? Would we treat the land not as background but as someone across the table, waiting for us to respond? And perhaps the deeper question is this: have we mistaken conversation for control? Ancient people asked, listened, adjusted. Modern people often demand, extract, insist. What if the planet isn't asking for control, but for dialogue? What if all it wants is for us to keep talking, keep listening, keep answering? So when the wind rattles your window tonight, imagine it less as noise and more as a voice. Ancient, immense, patient, waiting for your reply. Shall I continue next by diving into how different emotions of the earth, like joy, sorrow, anger, might appear not just in weather but in entire seasonal cycles, or shift toward the cosmic scale, asking whether planets themselves might be defined by their emotional climates? Let's dive into the idea that Earth's emotions might not only surface in storms or sudden events, but also in the slower rhythms of seasons. Because if weather is the planet's voice, then perhaps seasons are its moods, those longer, deeper states that shape how all life feels across months and years. Think of spring. After the long hush of winter, the air loosens, rain returns, buds push through soil. The whole world seems to exhale. In human terms, spring feels like joy after sorrow, renewal after grief. Psychologists would call it resilience, the capacity to come back after darkness. The Earth does this every year, without fail. It doesn't simply survive winter. It celebrates its own return. Summer, by contrast, is fullness. Heat swells, light lingers, growth surges. There's something exuberant, almost reckless, in how fields overflow and skies burn bright. It's not subtle. It's passion, energy, drive. If the planet has a season of elation, it's summer. Too much of it, of course, can scorch. But isn't that true of joy as well? Too much intensity can overwhelm. But in balance, summer is Earth's laughter, its dance. Autumn shifts the tone. Leaves blaze and fall, the air sharpens, animals prepare. It feels reflective, like the earth turning inward. There's beauty, but also melancholy. Not despair, more like wisdom. Autumn is Earth's acceptance, its graceful awareness that cycles turn, endings are part of life, and letting go can be beautiful. And then winter, cold, still, pared down. Life retreats, rests, waits. For us, it often feels heavy, like sadness or fatigue. But sadness has its purpose. It slows us down, makes us conserve, forces us to turn inward and gather strength. Winter is not Earth's death, but its contemplation. Its pause before another surge of becoming. It is the mood of patience, of silence, of necessary rest. Together, these seasons aren't just mechanics of orbit and tilt. They are emotional cycles. And we, as creatures woven into them, feel those cycles in our bones. Depression rising in winter, energy surging in spring, restlessness in summer heat, reflection in autumn. Our moods aren't separate from Earth's. They're synchronized. But what happens when climate change shifts the seasons? When winters grow shorter, summers more intense, springs less predictable. It's as though the planet's moods are becoming unstable. The rhythm falters, the balance slips. And as Earth's emotional cycles warp, so too do ours. Anxiety, burnout, restlessness. Perhaps they're not just cultural, but planetary, symptoms of living in a body whose own moods are disordered. It's a haunting thought that climate instability is not just a crisis of weather, but of planetary psychology. A disruption not only of ecosystems, but of moods, cycles, emotions themselves. And if that's true, then restoring balance isn't just about survival. It's about healing Earth's emotional life, and, by extension, our own. So here's the question. If we read seasons as Earth's long moods, then are we currently living through a kind of planetary breakdown? Or is this turbulence more like adolescence? Painful, chaotic, but carrying the possibility of growth. Would you like me to carry the next part into that metaphor, Earth in crisis as Earth in adolescence, or widen the view to ask whether other planets, with their storms and cycles, might also be experiencing their own versions of emotional states? Let's take that metaphor further. What if the turbulence we see now is Earth in adolescence? Because adolescence, whether in a person or perhaps in a planet, is rarely graceful. It's marked by extremes, bursts of energy, sudden quiet, confusion, anger, longing, and it always signals transformation. Think of how a teenager's emotions feel: volatile, amplified, everything dialed to maximum. Joy feels euphoric, sadness feels unbearable, anger feels explosive. Isn't that what today's climate looks like? Summers hotter than ever, storms more violent, droughts deeper, floods fiercer. The volume is turned up on every mood. The earth is no longer quiet in its seasons. It is shouting, swinging, searching. In adolescence, the body changes faster than the mind can keep up. Limbs grow too long, voices shift, identities wobble. Earth, too, is changing rapidly now. Ice caps retreating, forests shifting, coastlines redrawn. It's a body in transformation, awkward and urgent. And we, the cells of this planetary body, feel that awkwardness in our own instability, political unrest, economic shocks, emotional upheaval. Adolescence is also the time of questioning identity. A teenager asks, "Who am I? What do I want to become?" Maybe Earth is asking that now, through us. For billions of years, it has been a planet of cycles, life evolving slowly in rhythm. But with humans altering the atmosphere, oceans, and biosphere, the planet faces a new question. What kind of world will I be now? A stable one? A hostile one? A world of balance? Or of breakdown? The hopeful part is this: adolescence is not collapse. It is passage. Painful, yes, but full of possibility. It can end in resilience, maturity, new balance. For Earth, this could mean emerging into a steadier state, a climate rebalanced, a biosphere renewed. But it depends on whether we, as part of this planetary adolescence, act as reckless impulses or guiding wisdom. Because here's the unsettling truth. In adolescence, small choices matter. A teenager who finds care and guidance often flourishes. One abandoned to chaos may spiral. Earth, too, is at that threshold. The storms, the fires, the droughts, these may be symptoms of growth, not just decline. But growth needs support. It needs cooperation, balance, awareness. And that is our role. So perhaps the question isn't simply, is the Earth angry? Is it sad? Perhaps the real question is, are we willing to help it grow? To guide this adolescence into a future where the planet's emotional life steadies into maturity, rather than burning itself out in chaos? And here's the quiet thought to carry. If Earth is in adolescence, then so are we. Our civilizations are young, our wisdom uneven, our choices impulsive. Maybe the stormy sky is not only Earth's mood, it's our reflection, reminding us that both planet and people are learning, stumbling, and trying to become something more. Shall I continue next by exploring what maturity might look like for a planet, what an emotionally balanced Earth could be, or shift outward to compare how other planets' weather might reflect entirely different personalities? Let's stay with the idea of maturity, what an emotionally balanced Earth might look like. Because if adolescence is turbulence, then maturity is rhythm, steadiness, wisdom. What would it mean for a planet to grow into that? Start with balance. A mature person doesn't lose emotions. They learn to carry them differently. Anger still comes, but it's tempered. Grief still falls, but it flows with acceptance. Joy still rises, but it isn't reckless. Could Earth's weather one day find this same steadiness? Storms still forming, but not in destructive fury. Rain still falling, but in rhythms that sustain. Heat still glowing, but without burning. An Earth whose emotions are not suppressed, but harmonized. Maturity also means memory. Think of a forest that regrows after fire. The new trees aren't the same as the old. They rise carrying scars in their rings, stories in their soil. A mature Earth wouldn't erase its disasters but would carry them as wisdom, shaping ecosystems more resilient, communities more attentive, cycles more stable. There is also the idea of perspective. Adolescence sees the self at the center of everything. Maturity sees the web, the whole. If Earth's adolescence is this stormy, human-driven upheaval, then its maturity might be a world where the planet understands itself not as fragile fragments but as a unified organism. Every ecosystem, every species, including us, woven into a shared emotional field. In such a world, perhaps weather would not be violent outbursts but ongoing dialogue, subtle, nuanced, continuous. And what about joy? Because maturity is not only balance and restraint, it's also depth. A mature person can feel joy not only in pleasure but in stillness, in care, in quiet moments. Maybe a mature Earth would find its joy not in floods of growth or bursts of destruction, but in long, gentle rhythms, the slow turning of seasons, the quiet flourishing of life, the kind of stability that allows diversity to thrive. It's worth imagining what human life might feel like on such a planet. Anxiety might ease, not only because the sky's calm, but because our bodies, tuned to Earth's moods, would calm as well. We might live in societies less driven by crisis, more aligned with the cycles of growth and rest. Perhaps even our definitions of progress would change. Not endless acceleration, but balance, harmony, continuity. And here's the provocative thought. Maybe Earth's maturity depends on ours. A teenager becomes an adult not just by aging, but by learning. Maybe the planet, too, will not settle until we, its children, grow into wisdom ourselves, until we stop provoking imbalance and begin cultivating it. The Earth's emotional life might be waiting for us to catch up, to become partners in steadiness rather than catalysts of chaos. So, when you picture an emotionally mature Earth, perhaps imagine less thunder and more resonance, less outburst, more rhythm. A planet where weather still speaks, but as conversation, not as cry. Would you like me to continue next by painting a picture of what happens if we fail, if Earth's adolescence turns not into maturity but into breakdown, or move outward now, to explore whether other planets' strange and violent weather could be seen as their own distinct, emotional personalities? Let's walk into the darker path for a moment. What happens if Earth's adolescence never matures, if instead it tips into breakdown? Because just as a person can be overwhelmed by their own emotions, so too might a planet. Picture it, storms not as occasional outbursts, but as constant eruptions. Hurricanes that no longer come in seasons but in swarms. Heat that doesn't ebb with nightfall but lingers, relentless, pressing down like panic without pause. Drought stretching not for years, but for generations, carving entire regions into lifeless memory. This wouldn't be a planet with moods, it would be a planet locked in trauma. In human psychology, trauma often comes when the nervous system is overwhelmed, unable to reset. The body stays in survival mode. Fight, flight, freeze. Could the Earth do the same? Imagine a world where its climate systems lose their rhythm. Ice that once calmed heat is gone. Forests that once balanced carbon are silent ash. Oceans that once cooled storms are boiling. The feedback loops spin out of control, like a mind trapped in panic or despair. The signs are already whispering. Coral reefs bleaching like pale ghosts. Glaciers retreating, leaving bare rock behind. species vanishing in silence. These aren't just statistics, they're symptoms. If Earth's weather is its emotional life, then these are signs of breakdown, memory loss, collapse of resilience, exhaustion. And here's where the metaphor sharpens. In humans, breakdown isolates. Relationships fray, communication falters. The person becomes trapped within their own turmoil. For Earth, breakdown would mean the same. Ecosystems unraveling, species, including us, cut off from the balance that sustains them. A lonely planet, alive but unstable, unable to hold conversation, only outburst. But even breakdown doesn't erase all possibility. Some people recover, scarred but stronger. Others find new forms of balance after collapse, though never the same as before. Could Earth do that too? Could a world stripped of forests, glaciers, and countless species still find a new equilibrium, even if it looks nothing like the one we knew? Perhaps. But it would be a harsher, lonelier balance, like someone who survives but loses much of their joy. And if that's where we are heading, then we have to ask, are we willing to live in that world? A planet not whispering through breezes, but crying through storms. Not reflecting moods in graceful cycles, but stuck in trauma loops of fire, flood, and fury. That's not only ecological crisis, it's emotional desolation. So maybe the urgency of our moment isn't just about preventing physical damage. It's about protecting the Earth's chance at maturity, its ability to move beyond adolescence into wisdom, rather than spiraling into permanent unrest. The storms rising today might not be punishment. They might be warning. They might be Earth's way of telling US, help me grow, or I may break. Shall I continue next by exploring the hopeful side? What it would look like if humans actually partnered with Earth to guide it into maturity, or shift outward now to consider other planets and how their wild, alien weather might reveal entirely different emotional personalities. Let's turn toward the hopeful path now. What it might look like if humans chose to partner with Earth, guiding it into maturity instead of leaving it to spiral. Because if weather is emotion, then perhaps our role isn't to silence those emotions, but to help balance them. Start with listening. Just as you listen to a friend in distress, the first step is attention. We already have the tools. Satellites watching the clouds, sensors tracking heat, models mapping currents. But too often, we use these only for prediction. How will the storm hit us? How will the drought affect our crops? To partner with Earth, we'd need to shift the frame. Not how do we endure this mood, but what is it trying to say? Next is reciprocity. If floods are Earth's overflow, then wetlands and forests are ways of helping it hold and release gently. If heat waves are Earth's panic, then cutting emissions is like easing pressure, letting the atmosphere breathe. If wildfires are fever, then restoring soil and water cycles is medicine. Instead of seeing disasters as attacks, we might see them as cries for care, and answer with acts that soothe rather than provoke. Partnership would also mean pacing ourselves with the planet's rhythms. Imagine agriculture tuned to seasons rather than markets, cities designed to flow with wind and water rather than resist them, energy drawn from the sun and tides instead of forcing the earth to bleed coal and oil. In such a world, our daily lives wouldn't fight against weather but move with it, like dancing instead of stumbling. And here's a deeper vision. What if humanity saw itself not as Earth's master, but as one of its organs? We breathe for it, think for it, create for it. Just as the heart doesn't dominate the body but serves it, maybe our true role is to be Earth's consciousness, its way of reflecting, choosing, guiding. In that light, our choices aren't just survival strategies. They're the way we help Earth mature. Imagine what maturity could look like then, A planet where weather still speaks, but is harmony rather than crisis. Rains nourishing rather than drowning. Winds clearing rather than destroying. Seasons flowing in balance. Not silence, not perfection, but conversation steady enough that all life can thrive. And maybe the gift we'd receive in return is stability, not only in climate, but in ourselves. A humanity less anxious, less fractured, because the sky above no longer feels like a threat but like a companion. If weather is Earth's emotion, then living in partnership would mean living inside a calmer mind. This isn't fantasy. We already glimpse it in places where ecosystems heal, forests regrowing, rivers revived, wildlife returning. The moods there are gentler, the air cooler, the storms softer. The planet shows us what it feels like to be cared for. So perhaps the task before us is not to conquer Earth's emotions, but to help Earth find its balance. And in doing so, perhaps we find our own. Would you like me to keep building this hopeful vision? What daily life might feel like on such a balanced Earth? Or should we widen the lens now to imagine how other planets, with their wild alien climates, might each have their own distinct, emotional personalities? Let's linger in that hopeful vision and try to picture daily life on a balanced Earth. An Earth where weather is not crisis but conversation, where the moods of the planet and the moods of its people move in harmony instead of conflict. Imagine waking up in a city where the air feels light, not heavy with fumes. You breathe deeply, and the air itself feels like a welcome instead of a warning. The buildings around you are shaped not to fight the wind, but to move with it. Curved rooftops that guide breezes, shaded streets that cool themselves. You don't hear the constant hum of engines, but the softer sounds of water flowing, leaves stirring, voices carrying without strain. The city isn't separate from weather, it is tuned to it, like an instrument tuned to a song. Agriculture, too, would look different. Instead of forcing crops through chemical shortcuts, farms would follow the rhythms of soil and rain. Farmers wouldn't dread the sky but read it, planting when the earth is ready, resting when it asks for pause. Drought-resistant crops would grow alongside forests, restoring balance instead of stripping it. Food wouldn't just feed bodies, it would honor the conversation between land and weather. Energy would no longer come from tearing open the Earth's crust. Instead, it would flow with the same rhythms that guide weather. The sun, the wind, the tides. Imagine homes that breathe with the day, windows opening to morning light, cooling with evening breezes. Powered by panels that turn with the sun's arc. Life would not be about resisting the moods of the planet, but about aligning with them. Even our emotions would feel different. Without the constant anxiety of looming disaster, human moods might soften, too. Instead of eco-anxiety, perhaps eco-trust, the quiet confidence that the world is stable enough to dream in. Children would grow up not fearing storms as monsters, but respecting them as voices. Loud, yes, but not hostile. Communities would celebrate the first rains of spring as joy, the cool breath of autumn as gratitude, the hush of snow as rest. Our calendars might even return to being seasonal, not just numerical. Festivals rising not from arbitrary dates, but from the moods of the earth itself. Harvest celebrations when the fields sing, moments of quiet gathering when winter's silence settles in. The year wouldn't feel like a march of days, but like breathing. Inhale, exhale, growth, rest. And in such a world, perhaps the line between weather and emotion would blur completely. We would see grief in rain and know it is necessary. We would see anger in storms and know it is energy released. We would see joy in sunlight and know it is life itself. The moods of the planet would not frighten us, because they would mirror our own, and both would be balanced. It's easy to call this utopian, but maybe it's simply memory. echoes of how humans once lived, before the split between people and planet widened. Maybe the task of the future is not to invent a new world, but to remember how to live inside the moods of this one. And so the question becomes, if this vision is possible, what first small steps could we take to answer Earth's voice now? Would you like me to continue by grounding this vision in concrete possibilities? What daily partnership practices might look like? Or should we widen out at last to explore how alien planets, with their strange storms and skies, might each embody their own unique emotional lives? Let's ground this vision in the concrete. What daily partnership practices with Earth's emotions might actually look like? Because big ideas are stirring, but what matters most is how they echo in the small choices of everyday life. Start with listening. A mature partnership begins with paying attention. For us, that could mean more than checking the weather app for convenience. It could mean noticing the wind's direction, the quality of light, the timing of rains, and letting those observations guide our actions. Farmers have always done this, but imagine if city dwellers did too. Noticing when the air feels strained, when the sky feels unsettled, and adjusting our rhythm instead of forcing it. Next comes reciprocity. If weather is the Earth's way of expressing, then our way of replying is through care. On a small scale, that could mean planting trees not just for beauty, but as companions that cool, clean, and soften the moods of the air. Collecting rainwater, not only to conserve, but to honor the gift when it comes. Designing gardens that welcome pollinators, helping the planet's cycles continue their song. Each act, however small, is like answering Earth's sentences with kindness. Community rituals could play a role again, not as superstition, but as remembrance. Imagine neighborhoods gathering to celebrate the first spring rain, not just with umbrellas but with gratitude. Or people pausing in winter's quiet, turning off lights for a night to rest with the earth. These would not change the global climate in an instant, but they would change our relationship to it, shifting us from seeing weather as background noise to seeing it as dialogue. Technology, too, could align more closely with the planet's moods. Instead of fighting floods with endless concrete walls, we could build with wetlands and floodplains, letting water breathe. Instead of sealing cities against heat with air conditioning alone, we could grow shaded corridors, green roofs, structures that welcome breezes. The point is not resistance but resonance. To design with Earth, not against it. And then there's emotion itself. What if we treated our own moods as reflections of Earth's weather, rather than private burdens? If grief feels like rain, perhaps the right response is not to suppress it, but to let it cleanse. If anger feels like a storm, maybe it needs safe release, not denial. If joy feels like sunshine, perhaps it is meant to be shared widely, like warmth across a field. By honoring our emotions in the same way we honor weather, we might align the microclimate of our bodies with the macroclimate of the world. Partnership doesn't demand perfection. It asks for attention, reciprocity, and patience. Just as the Earth forgives storms and returns to calm, we too can forgive mistakes and keep moving toward balance. The key is not silence, but conversation, learning to speak and listen in equal measure. And maybe that's the most important practice of all, to live each day as though the weather is not happening to us, but with us. To recognize that when the rain falls or the wind stirs, the Earth is speaking, and we, simply by breathing, are part of its reply. So here's a thought. What would change if, tomorrow, you greeted the weather not with complaint or indifference, but with a question? What are you telling me today? Shall I continue by imagining how entire societies might be reshaped if they took that approach collectively, or shift outward now to explore how the strange storms of other planets, like Jupiter's endless cyclone or Venus's choking clouds, might reveal their own alien emotional lives? Let's expand the vision. What entire societies might look like if they lived as though weather were conversation, not background. Because when a whole culture listens to the moods of the planet, daily life doesn't just change in small habits. It changes in structure, in rhythm, in meaning. Imagine cities designed as living organisms. Instead of concrete canyons trapping heat, buildings would breathe like trees, cooling with shade, exhaling moisture, tuned to the wind instead of blocking it. Streets wouldn't funnel water into gutters only to waste it, but would guide rain into gardens, fountains, reservoirs, each storm becoming a gift instead of a threat. A thundercloud over the horizon wouldn't spark dread of damage, but anticipation of replenishment. Economies, too, would shift. Instead of measuring success in endless growth, societies might measure balance. How well water cycles are restored, how evenly seasons flow, how stable the Earth's moods remain. Energy grids would ebb and surge with weather itself, sunny days swelling power, stormy nights storing wind. Work rhythms could bend to the sky. Farmers already live this way, but perhaps even offices could pause during great storms, letting human schedules honor planetary moods. Education would change most of all. Children would learn to read clouds as fluently as words, to feel shifts in wind as naturally as shifts in tone. They'd be taught not only math and history but listening, to Earth, to their own bodies, to the resonance between them. Festivals would be seasonal, not fixed, celebrating the first rains, the longest day, the return of migrating birds. Society would breathe with the planet, not against it. Law and policy in such a world would be less about control and more about respect. Rivers would be granted rights as living beings, forests recognized as guardians of climate, storms treated not as enemies but as reminders. When disasters came, rebuilding wouldn't mean erasing the land's voice, but harmonizing with it better next time. Instead of walls against the sea, homes would rise on stilts, floating with the tide. Instead of suppressing fire, landscapes would be managed with controlled burns, acknowledging fire as part of Earth's cycle rather than pretending it doesn't belong. And perhaps most importantly, emotions would no longer feel so isolating. Grief would be recognized as part of the rain cycle, anger as part of storms, joy as sunlight, collective experiences, not private burdens. Communities might gather during long rains to share stories, during harsh winters to share warmth, during bright summers to share abundance. In such a world, human culture would be less about mastering life and more about living with it. This isn't entirely fantasy. Hints of it exist already. Indigenous traditions that treat land as kin, modern cities experimenting with green infrastructure, festivals still tied to solstices and harvests. The pieces are here. We've just forgotten how to weave them together. And maybe the future won't be about inventing new ways of life, but remembering older ones, adapting them with new knowledge. A society that listens to weather as Earth's emotion would not only survive better, it would feel more at home, less like a species apart, more like a voice inside a greater conversation. So the question becomes, are we capable of becoming such a society? Or will we keep treating storms as enemies until the Earth's voice grows too loud for us to endure? Would you like me to keep imagining this collective future in more detail? What governments, economies, and even arts might look like in such a world? Or shift outward now, into the cosmic perspective of how other planets' wild weather could be seen as their own emotional personalities? Let's imagine this collective future in more detail. What governments, economies, and even art might look like if societies truly lived in partnership with Earth's moods. Because once you take the idea seriously, everything changes. Governments, for one, would no longer treat climate policy as a separate category, tucked away in ministries or committees. Instead, every decision, transport, housing, trade, would begin with the question: how does this align with Earth's emotional balance? Budgets might not just measure GDP, but also rainfall stability, soil fertility, biodiversity health. A country's strength would not be how much it extracts, but how much it harmonizes. Leaders would be judged not by quarterly growth, but by the steadiness of the seasons under their stewardship. Economies would be built less on extraction and more on reciprocity. Water, soil, and forests wouldn't be commodities to burn through, but partners in productivity. Imagine a marketplace where carbon capture, soil regeneration, or river restoration were as valuable as steel or silicon. Wealth would be measured in resilience. How many storms a city could endure without collapse? How much abundance could be grown without destabilizing the rains? The stock market would watch not only profits but patterns of weather, because a storm, in this world, isn't external. It's the earth expressing itself. Art too would shift. We already use weather as metaphor in songs and paintings. But in this future, art would not just use weather, it would collaborate with it. Sculptures designed to sing when wind passes through them. Paintings that shift color with humidity. Music that incorporates rainfall or storm recordings not as background but as co-performers. Imagine a symphony played in open air, where the weather itself, sun, wind, drizzle, becomes an instrument. Art would remind us constantly, we are not outside this conversation. We are part of it. Even religion and philosophy might change. Instead of looking for transcendence beyond Earth, people might find sacredness in the Earth's very moods. A gentle breeze might be felt as blessing, a storm as prophecy, a flood as grief. Instead of asking how to escape the cycles of life, wisdom might mean learning how to dwell gracefully within them. Daily culture would be different too. Cities might adopt weather holidays, days of pause during great storms, not from fear but from reverence. Families might tell stories tied to seasons instead of dates. When the rains return, we gather. When the first frost comes, we honor our ancestors. Weddings, funerals, and celebrations could be synchronized with the Earth's moods, weaving human memory with planetary rhythm. And technology, it would no longer strive to control weather, but to converse with it. Forecasting wouldn't just warn of storms, it would offer guidance. Here is the Earth's mood. Here is how to live with it today. Our devices would remind us not only when it's time to wake up, but when it's time to plant, to rest, to gather. In such a society, the boundary between human and planet would blur. We wouldn't say, the weather is bad. We would say, the Earth is restless today. We wouldn't dread storms as interruptions, but accept them as part of the larger conversation of being alive. And maybe, in that world, we would finally feel something we have long forgotten, that to live well is not to master life, but to belong within it. Would you like me to keep building this vision, showing how such a society might handle conflict, justice, and cooperation differently under this worldview, or shift outward now to explore other planet storms and what they might reveal about alien, emotional climates? Let's keep building this vision, but now through the lens of conflict, justice, and cooperation. Because if society were truly aligned with Earth's emotional life, even these human struggles would look different. Conflict first. In today's world, wars are often fought over resources: oil, water, fertile land. But in a society that treats weather as Earth's emotions, fighting over those things would feel like arguing over the planet's heartbeat. Instead of claiming ownership, nations might negotiate as caretakers, because damaging one region's climate would ripple everywhere. Borders would matter less than watersheds, forests, or wind patterns. Imagine peace treaties not just between people, but between people and rivers, between cities and forests. Conflict would shift from who controls what to how do we keep balance so Earth's moods remain steady for all. Justice, too, would change. Today, when disasters strike, aid is framed as charity or politics. But if weather is seen as conversation, then disaster relief would be understood as restoring balance, not pitying victims. A flood-ravaged village wouldn't just receive supplies. It would be given priority in rebuilding in ways that respect the river's voice. Climate justice wouldn't be optional. It would be the core of justice itself. Because harming the skies of one community would be seen as destabilizing the emotional life of the planet we all share. Cooperation might become the deepest shift. Nations would still differ, but imagine alliances formed not around military power or trade dominance, but around ecosystems. The coalition of rainforest nations might carry as much weight as today's economic blocs, their stewardship valued as essential to the planet's calm. Ocean nations might be celebrated as guardians of tides, Arctic peoples as keepers of the Earth's cool breath. Instead of competing to grow GDP, countries might compete to keep Earth's moods most harmonious. And perhaps even law itself would transform. Courts would recognize the rights of rivers, forests, and even weather patterns. Imagine a lawsuit not just about pollution, but about emotional harm to the planet. A company dumping toxins might be charged not only with endangering life, but with destabilizing the Earth's moods. The legal system would be less about punishing humans and more about protecting the dialogue between humans and planet. This would change how we think of power, too. Today, power is often the ability to control. In this world, power would be the ability to listen, to restore balance, to soothe. Leaders would be judged not by their speeches, but by their capacity to keep the skies gentle, the storms rare, the seasons steady. And people would see themselves not as rulers, but as participants. Cells in a larger body, voices in a larger chorus. It might sound idealistic, but pieces of this already exist. In New Zealand, rivers have been granted legal personhood. In some parts of South America, constitutions recognize the rights of nature itself. Indigenous legal traditions worldwide see land not as property, but as relative. These aren't fragments of the past. They may be glimpses of the future. And here's the quiet possibility. If we truly lived this way, human conflict might lessen, not because we solved every disagreement, but because we'd all be tuned to a greater harmony. Like musicians in an orchestra, we could quarrel less about our parts if we remembered the symphony we're playing within. So the question is, are we capable of becoming a civilization that places Earth's emotional balance at the heart of justice and cooperation? Or will we continue as we are, ignoring the conversation until the Earth's voice drowns out our own? Would you like me to continue this vision one step further, imagining how art, culture, and even spirituality might evolve in such a society? Or should we finally step outward to explore alien worlds and what their violent or serene climates might reveal about their own emotional personalities? Let's carry this vision further into art, culture, and spirituality. Because if a society truly lived in dialogue with the Earth's emotions, then its deepest expressions of beauty and meaning would change too. Art would no longer be confined to canvas, stone, or screen. It would be woven directly into the moods of the sky. Imagine sculptures that sing only when the wind blows, murals painted with pigments that shift in color as humidity rises, or theaters built open to the rain, so each performance carries the sky as co-creator. Weather wouldn't be the backdrop of art, it would be a collaborator. A storm might improvise its percussion on a concert hall roof, or fog might transform a city square into a living installation. Every gallery would stretch beyond walls, into the shifting canvas of clouds and seasons. Culture itself would be seasonal. Instead of holidays fixed to numbers, festivals would follow the moods of the planet. A festival of first rains could mark the start of renewal. A night of longest moonlight might be a time for reflection. These celebrations wouldn't just be symbolic, they would root people into the living cycles of their world. Storytelling, dance, and food would all turn with the weather's wheel, creating cultures that breathe with the sky instead of against it. Spirituality, too, would shift. Instead of searching for transcendence in distant heavens, meaning would be found in the nearness of clouds, winds, and tides. A gentle rain might be prayed with, a storm entered as a ceremony of release. People would gather not to escape the moods of the earth, but to honor them. Temples might be open-air sanctuaries where sun, wind, and rain are invited inside, where worship means listening, not speaking over. Even philosophy would grow differently. Instead of asking, "What is the meaning of life beyond this world?" the central question might become, "How do we live beautifully within it?" Wisdom would mean knowing when to act like fire, when to rest like winter, when to flow like water. Human ethics would be modeled on weather itself, responsive, adaptive, balanced. And perhaps art, culture, and spirituality would merge, no longer separated into categories. A dance under rain could be art, celebration, and prayer at once. A mural painted on a floodplain wall might be both defense and devotion. A poem written at dawn might carry not just human feeling, but the mood of the morning sky. In such a world, beauty wouldn't be about controlling nature or standing apart from it. Beauty would be resonance, the alignment of human creation with Earth's emotions. And meaning wouldn't be abstract. It would be felt every time the wind shifted, every time clouds gathered, every time the first snow fell. So here's the thought. Maybe the future of culture is not innovation in isolation, but rejoining the oldest collaboration of all, the one between human imagination and Earth's weather. Would you like me to continue by imagining how such a society would pass down memory and history, through seasons and storms instead of books and dates, or widen outward at last to explore other planets' emotional climates, like Jupiter's endless storm or Venus's suffocating haze? Let's imagine how such a society would pass down memory and history, because if Earth's moods are central to life, then stories, too, would be carried not in calendars or textbooks alone, but in storms, seasons, and skies. Instead of marking time only with numbered years, people might say, "This happened in a year of long rains," or the winter when the snows came late. History would be remembered not as abstract dates, but as lived dialogue with the planet. A flood that reshaped a valley would be remembered alongside the birth of a generation. A storm that scattered homes would also be told as the moment neighbors came together. The Earth's moods would be woven into human memory as inseparable threads. Children would learn history by walking it. They would be taken to rivers and told, "Here, the waters rose once, and our ancestors rebuilt higher, wiser." They would stand in forests and hear, "Here fire came, but from its ash new life began." Lessons would not be trapped in books alone, but carved into landscapes, sung into seasons. The earth itself would be the archive. Myths and legends would grow from these events, but not in the way we sometimes dismiss myths as untrue. They would be truths told in story form, how the great drought taught patience, how the storm taught respect, how the gentle spring taught gratitude. In a society that listens to the planet, history and myth blur, because both are ways of remembering how to live in balance. Even personal memory might take this shape. Instead of saying, "I was born on March 12th, someone might say, "I was born when the rains first softened the earth that year." A wedding might be remembered as the summer of endless clear skies. A death as the winter of deep snows. Human milestones would be folded into Earth's moods, so that to remember a person is also to remember the weather that carried them. Art would serve as record, too. Murals of storms on walls, carvings of floods on doorways, songs sung only when a certain season returns. Instead of archives buried in paper or cloud servers, memory would be cyclical, alive, retold each time the Earth shifted into a familiar mood. A story might only be sung when the wind blows a certain way, ensuring it is never forgotten but always renewed. And here's the beauty of such a memory system. It would be participatory. History wouldn't belong to scholars alone. Every farmer watching the sky, every child noticing the turn of seasons, every elder recalling a storm would be part of keeping memory alive. To forget history would mean to stop noticing the weather, a forgetting that would be impossible in a society so deeply tuned to Earth's emotions. So in this world, remembering isn't just about looking back. It's about recognizing that the Earth, too, remembers. Every scar in the land, every ring in a tree, every layer of ice holds memory. And humans, instead of pretending to stand outside of that, would learn to read it and to weave their own lives into it. Which leads to a deeper question. If Earth holds memory in its storms and seasons, then are disasters not only emotions but also reminders? Its way of keeping history alive so that we cannot ignore what has been. Would you like me to continue exploring this thread? How Earth's memory might speak through landscapes and weather, or shift outward now to finally explore other planets and how their strange weather might be glimpses into their own emotional lives? Let's follow that thread, Earth's memory, and how it might speak through landscapes and weather. Because if emotions are expressions of the present, memory is the echo of the past, and the Earth seems to carry both. Think of tree rings, each one a silent record of seasons, wet years leaving wide bands, drought years leaving thin, scars etched by fire or lightning. A forest is not just alive in the moment. It remembers, holding centuries of moods in its wood. Walk among old trees and you are not just surrounded by life. You are surrounded by memory, a living archive of Earth's emotional past. Or consider glaciers. They look still, but inside them lie bubbles of ancient air, tiny prisons of atmosphere from thousands of years ago. Scientists who drill into ice cores don't just measure carbon, they're listening to Earth's diary. The planet remembers its long winters, its warm spells, its restless shifts. In those frozen layers, we can hear whispers of climates long gone, the moods Earth once carried and released. Even deserts speak memory. Sand dunes roll like waves, sculpted by winds that blew centuries ago. Fossilized riverbeds tell of water that once coursed through barren lands. The cracked Earth is not just emptiness, it is remembrance of abundance lost, a story of what was, still written on the ground. Storms, too, carry memory. After a hurricane, coastlines are redrawn. The land itself remembers the storm in every fallen tree, every shifted shoreline. Survivors remember it in story, in rebuilt homes, in the quiet unease when the wind howls again. Each disaster, then, is not only an outburst but also a marker, a reminder carved into Earth's body and into ours. And here's a haunting thought. Maybe Earth uses weather not just to express emotion, but to remember. Just as we replay memories through stories or dreams, perhaps the planet replays its history through patterns. Monsoons that return each year, floods that follow ancient rhythms, even droughts that echo cycles older than civilization. The Earth doesn't forget. It relives. That makes climate change even more profound. Because in altering the rhythms of weather, we're not only changing Earth's present emotions, we may be rewriting its memory. The planet's long cycles of ice and warmth, flood and drought, are being bent into new patterns. Imagine what that means. A planet with a disrupted memory, like a person who can no longer recognize their own past. A kind of amnesia, or worse, a trauma so deep it overrides all other recollections. And yet, even here, there's possibility. Memory is not just pain, it is resilience. Just as scars show survival, Earth's landscapes show persistence. Forests regrow after fire. Rivers carve new paths after floods. Ecosystems, given time, weave new stories. Earth doesn't forget, but it transforms memory into strength. So when we walk across a desert, or through a forest, or beside an ocean, we are walking inside memory. Not separate from it, but part of it. Our own lives are recorded too, not in tree rings or ice cores, but in the way we alter, restore, or neglect the land. The Earth remembers us, whether we realize it or not. Which leads to a quiet question. If Earth's moods are emotions, and its landscapes are memory, then what kind of story are we writing into it right now? Will the future read this as a time of violence and imbalance, or as the adolescence that grew, painfully, into wisdom? Would you like me to continue exploring how Earth might dream through whether the way humans dream through memory, or at last shift the gaze outward to alien planets and how their extreme climates might be their own strange emotional languages? Let's linger a little longer on the idea of Earth dreaming. Because if weather is emotion and landscapes are memory, then perhaps dreams, too, have their planetary parallel. When we dream, our minds sift through memory, rearranging fragments of past and present into strange, symbolic images. A storm inside a dream might be our own body processing anger or fear. Could the Earth do something similar? Could certain weather patterns be less about immediate necessity and more about rehearsal, reflection, or even release? Think of lightning storms that sweep across empty deserts, striking sand into glass but touching no human life. Or great blizzards that blanket remote tundras where almost nothing stirs. These events may not serve an obvious purpose in ecosystems or climate cycles, yet they arrive with force and vanish without explanation. Could they be Earth's dreams? Moments where energy reshuffles, symbols play, and nothing productive happens but something deep is processed? Auroras, too, feel dreamlike. Curtains of green and violet dancing at the poles, born from invisible solar winds colliding with Earth's magnetic shield. They serve no direct function for survival, yet they mesmerize. To watch them is to glimpse the planet in reverie, the sky slipping into imagery as vivid and strange as any human dream. Even long cycles resemble dreaming. El Niño and La Niña, those vast swings of ocean and air, feel like the planet shifting between recurring patterns, sometimes feverish, sometimes calm, like a body turning in restless sleep. They carry memories of past rhythms, yet they also create new outcomes, as though Earth is both remembering and reimagining itself. And then there are landscapes that look like dream residue, stone arches in deserts, carved by winds that whispered for millennia, canyons etched by rivers long gone, like faded memories still haunting the present. Dreams leave impressions on us. Perhaps Earth's dreams leave impressions on its skin. If that's true, then maybe we already live inside Earth's dreams. Every foggy morning, every sudden thunderclap, every shimmering aurora could be a glimpse into the planet's subconscious, its way of weaving memory and emotion into symbols too vast for us to fully grasp. Which leads to a haunting symmetry. When we dream of the Earth, storms, oceans, mountains, could it be that the Earth is dreaming of us too? Our imaginations and its weather entangled, like two minds in conversation across different languages. So perhaps the question is not just whether weather is Earth's emotion, but whether dreams and weather are reflections of the same deeper truth. That to be alive, whether as a person or a planet, is to feel, to remember, and to dream. Would you like me to continue unfolding this poetic vision of Earth's dreaming weather, or shift outward now to finally explore alien planets? Jupiter's endless storm, Saturn's hexagon, Venus's choking clouds, as their own strange emotional expressions? All right, let's step outward now, into the cosmos, and ask, if Earth's weather can be read as emotion, then what might the storms of other planets reveal about their emotional lives? Because our solar system is filled with skies that feel less like atmospheres and more like personalities. Start with Jupiter. The great red spot has raged for centuries, an enormous storm larger than Earth itself, spinning endlessly, never quite dissipating. If storms are anger, then Jupiter carries an anger that never cools, a fury woven into its very identity. But maybe it's not only rage. Maybe it's endurance, persistence, a kind of stubbornness. Imagine a being whose emotion doesn't flicker but holds steady for generations. Jupiter might be the embodiment of unrelenting intensity, an eternal outburst turned into character. Saturn is stranger. At its north pole spins a hexagon, a six-sided storm so vast and precise it looks artificial. How can a planet dream in geometry? Perhaps Saturn's emotions are not chaos, but structure, ordered moods, symmetrical feelings. Where Earth's storms are wild and shifting, Saturn's are mathematical, as if its emotional life is written in logic rather than passion. A mind of patterns instead of tempests. And then there's Venus, wrapped in thick clouds, its surface scorching hot enough to melt lead. Its weather is endless suffocation, its winds roaring faster than hurricanes on Earth. If Venus has emotions, they are buried beneath opacity, feelings too dense to see, too intense to touch. Venus might be grief held so tightly it becomes pressure, or passion burning so fiercely it consumes itself. A planet in permanent fever. Mars, by contrast, wears its emotions in dust. Global storms sometimes engulf the entire planet, wrapping it in red haze for weeks. It feels lonely, restless, a world of silence broken by sudden outbursts of movement. Mars's weather is thin, but when it stirs, it is dramatic, as if the planet, mostly quiet, sometimes remembers it still has a voice. And what of Neptune, far out in the cold? Its winds are the fastest in the solar system, howling across a frozen sea of gas. The planet itself is distant, dim, and quiet, but its winds scream. If that's an emotion, perhaps it's longing. A distant world crying into the void, unheard but unceasing. It's easy to dismiss this as metaphor, but here's the curious thing. Scientists already describe these planets in emotional terms. They speak of angry storms, lonely deserts, wild winds. Maybe it's because our language is limited. Or maybe it's because deep down we sense something real. That weather, wherever it exists, is expression. That atmospheres, whether on Earth or Jupiter, are the emotional skins of planets. And this raises a tantalizing possibility. If weather is emotion, then every planet in the cosmos has a personality. Some calm, some furious, some mysterious. We live not in a silent void, but in a galaxy of moods, each world dreaming and storming in its own strange way. Which leads to the next question. If Earth is adolescence, learning to find balance, then what ages, or emotional stages, might these other planets represent? Would you like me to continue by exploring that metaphor, planets as beings at different ages of emotional life, or circle back to Earth, asking what it means to be one planet among so many different moods in the universe? Let's follow that metaphor. planets as beings at different ages of emotional life. Because if Earth is adolescence, full of turbulence and potential, then perhaps the rest of our solar system is like a family of worlds, each at its own stage of becoming. Jupiter, with its centuries-old storm, might be the elder. Not calm, exactly, but ancient in its emotion, like a wise but fiery ancestor whose intensity has burned so long it feels eternal. The great red spot is not the tantrum of youth. It's the passion of age, held steady, almost ritualized. Jupiter feels like the grandparent who has seen everything and still carries storms inside, but also stability. Saturn, with its geometric hexagon, might be the philosopher. Its moods are ordered, patterned, almost contemplative. Where Earth thrashes in chaos, Saturn dreams in symmetry. Perhaps it represents emotional maturity not as calmness, but as clarity, a mind that has learned to find meaning in structure, turning storms into patterns, feelings into design. Mars seems younger. Its global dust storms rise suddenly and vanish unpredictably, like the fits of a child, loud, messy, brief. And in between, long silence, as if it hasn't yet learned consistency. Its thin air feels fragile, like a being still trying to find its voice, speaking rarely but dramatically. Mars could be the sibling still searching for identity, sometimes quiet, sometimes explosive. Venus feels more like a tragic figure, perhaps the adult who burned too hot, too fast. Once it may have had oceans, gentle breezes, balance, but now it is locked in fever, its atmosphere a heavy blanket of grief or rage. Venus is the cautionary tale, the elder who reminds us of what happens when balance is lost, when passion overwhelms until nothing else remains. Neptune, at the edge of darkness, might be the dreamer. Its winds scream across endless cold, too distant for warmth, too deep for calm. Yet its colors shimmer in blue, serene to the eye even as its storms rage invisibly. Neptune feels like the poet of the solar system, emotions vast, unknowable, hidden behind beauty, longing for a listener across the void. And Earth, adolescent Earth, sits in the middle of this family, still unstable, still shifting moods too quickly, still caught between innocence and responsibility. Its storms are frequent, its climate restless, its emotions unpredictable. Yet adolescence holds promise, the potential to grow into something steady, balanced, wise. Earth is not yet what it will be. If planets are stages of emotional life, then our solar system is not just rocks and gases orbiting a star. It is a story of moods, a lineage of personalities, each showing a different possibility of what a world can feel like. Some burn out, some endure, some search, some dream. And maybe that's the lesson for us. Earth's adolescence doesn't last forever. The question is not whether it will grow up, but how. Will it become Saturn's philosopher, Jupiter's elder, Neptune's dreamer, or Venus's tragedy? Would you like me to keep expanding this metaphor, imagining what maturity could look like for Earth and the long cosmic family of planets, or circle back inward to explore how humanity, Earth's consciousness, fits into this emotional evolution? Let's circle back inward now to humanity, because if Earth is adolescence, then maybe we are its consciousness, the part of it that reflects, questions, and chooses. Which means our role in this planetary emotional journey is not just as passengers, but as participants. Think of it this way. When a person is a teenager, their emotions can feel overwhelming, even destructive. But what helps them mature isn't just time, it's awareness. The moment a young person begins to recognize why they feel what they feel, they gain the power to grow. Could we be that awareness for Earth? Could humanity be the part of the planet that learns to name its storms, to understand its floods, to find meaning in its grief and joy? It makes sense when you think about it. We are made of the earth. Our bodies are water, minerals, air. Our emotions rise from chemical shifts, the same forces that stir clouds and tides. But unlike storms, we can reflect. We can look at a flood and say, "This is grief, and here is what it teaches." We can look at drought and say, "This is strain, and here is how we respond." Our minds may not be separate from Earth's weather. They may be its way of seeing itself. This reframes our crises. Climate change stops being just a technical problem of carbon and becomes an emotional imbalance in Earth's adolescence. Our role, then, is not only to repair but to guide, to act like the reflective mind of a body that is thrashing, saying, "I see what you feel. I understand. Let's find balance together." Of course, the danger is that we do the opposite. Just as a teenager overwhelmed by feelings can spiral into destructive choices, so can we. If humanity ignores Earth's moods, exploiting rather than listening, then we become like thoughts that betray the body, impulses that drive it into harm. The planet might survive, but as Venus shows us, survival doesn't guarantee harmony. A fever can last forever, but there is hope. Because humanity is not only capable of destruction, it is also capable of care. When we restore forests, when we clean rivers, when we align cities with seasons, we act as Earth's self-compassion. When we tell stories that honor weather, when we gather to celebrate rain or sun, we act as Earth's self-awareness. When we reflect on its storms and call them not punishment but conversation, we act as Earth's wisdom. And maybe that's the real choice before us, to decide whether we will be Earth's panic or Earth's patience, its impulse or its reflection, its fever or its healing. If weather is Earth's emotion, then perhaps humanity is its therapy. We are the voice inside its mind that can say, "Yes, I feel the storm, but I also see a way through it." The question is whether we will play that role, or whether we'll let the storm speak louder than we do. Would you like me to continue this thread, imagining humanity as Earth's emotional guidance system, or turn back outward now, comparing how alien civilizations, if they exist, might read their own planet's moods as we are just beginning to read ours? Let's continue the thread. Humanity as Earth's emotional guidance system. Because if weather is Earth's emotion, then maybe our role isn't to silence those emotions but to help interpret, balance, and respond, just as awareness does in a human mind. Think about your own body. When you feel anger rising, it's not bad. It's a signal. Something needs attention. But without reflection, that signal can explode in ways that harm yourself and others. Reflection turns raw feeling into guidance. Why am I angry? What should I do with this energy? Humanity could be that same reflective function for Earth. Storms, droughts, fires, they're signals. Our role is not to dismiss them, nor to be consumed by them, but to interpret. Why is this happening? What response restores balance? This is not so different from how ecosystems already work. Forests regulate their own growth, rivers carve their own paths, oceans absorb and release heat. But none of these systems think in words. They adjust automatically, beautifully, but without conscious reflection. Humanity, however, can reflect. We can look at patterns across centuries, imagine futures, make choices that ripple outward. Perhaps that's why Earth gave rise to us, not as rulers, but as mirrors, as awareness. And awareness carries responsibility. A thought can guide or mislead a person. Humanity, as Earth's thoughts, can do the same. When we burn forests, pollute air, poison oceans, we act like destructive impulses, urges that harm the body. When we plant, restore, and listen, we act like healing thoughts, care that calms the nervous system. The Earth feels both, and its moods shift accordingly. Imagine if humanity truly embraced this role. Science would no longer be just about prediction, but about translation, turning Earth's emotions into understanding. Policy would no longer be damage control, but therapy, guiding the planet toward steadiness. Education would no longer treat weather as background, but as language, teaching children not only to read the sky, but to listen to what it feels. And perhaps most importantly, culture would no longer see itself as separate. Our songs, art, and rituals would be Earth reflecting on itself through us. Our grief at a wildfire would not just be sympathy, it would be the planet mourning through us. Our joy at spring blossoms would not just be delight, it would be Earth smiling through us. In this view, we are not outside observers. We are Earth's emotional self-awareness. That makes every choice feel different. When we build in harmony, the Earth feels steadier. When we destroy recklessly, the Earth feels unrest. We are not passengers on a ship. We are thoughts in a mind, moods in a body. The health of the whole depends on the awareness of its parts. And here is the haunting possibility. Maybe Earth cannot grow into maturity without us. Just as a person cannot integrate emotions without reflection, perhaps a planet cannot integrate its moods without consciousness. We may be the part of Earth that carries it across adolescence, guiding it into wisdom, or the part that fails, leaving it lost in storm. So the question is not only, what is the weather telling us? It is also, what story are we telling back? Would you like me to keep deepening this image? Humanity as the voice in Earth's mind, or widen outward now, to speculate how alien civilizations might interpret their own planet's storms and skies as emotional languages? Let's widen outward now, toward alien civilizations, and how they might interpret the moods of their own planets. Because if we're only just beginning to glimpse weather as emotion here on Earth, who's to say others haven't already been living in that awareness for millennia? Imagine a civilization on a world like Jupiter. Their sky is endless storm, lightning splitting clouds, the great red spots swirling across centuries. If they evolved within that tempest, how would they think of emotion? To them, perhaps, feelings wouldn't be fleeting ripples like ours, but vast and enduring, passions that last lifetimes, maybe even generations. Anger wouldn't be a momentary flare. It would be identity. Love wouldn't be a passing warmth. It would be a permanent current. To live under such a sky would mean seeing emotion not as fragile, but as monumental. Now picture a civilization on a world like Saturn, beneath the calm yet uncanny symmetry of that polar hexagon. Their emotional language might not be wild or stormy at all, but geometric. Feelings experienced as patterns, repeating forms, resonances. For them, sadness might not be tears but a spiral. Joy, not laughter but a perfect circle. Their art, their philosophy, even their music might be built from emotions shaped as structures, just as their skies are storms shaped as geometry. What of Venus? Any life there, if it somehow found a way to exist, would know a world of suffocating heat, cloaked in clouds. Perhaps they would see emotion not as something shared openly, but as something buried, hidden, overwhelming. Their myths might speak of passions that consume, griefs that never release, longings that choke the breath. To them, emotion would not be light or fleeting. It would be survival against pressure, the endurance of fire. Or Mars, where silence dominates and dust storms rise suddenly to shroud the whole world. A Martian civilization might view emotion as rare but overwhelming. Most days calm. But when feelings come, they engulf everything, covering every horizon. For them, restraint might be valued, because to feel too often would mean to drown in red storms. Their songs might be sparse, their stories patient, their culture built on waiting for the dust to clear. And then imagine Neptune's children, if such beings existed. Living under skies of screaming winds and a distant dim sun, they might see emotion as infinite distance, feelings not contained but stretching outward endlessly, never finding closure. Perhaps their philosophy would be longing itself, the idea that to feel is always to reach, never to arrive. To us, these are metaphors, but to them, they would be reality. Cultures born inside emotional climates very different from Earth's. And maybe that's the deeper truth. Just as planets differ in size, color, and orbit, so too might they differ in emotional personality. The universe could be a vast gallery of moods, each planet carrying its own storms, its own rhythms, its own way of feeling. And if civilizations exist out there, perhaps their greatest question is the same as ours. What is our planet feeling, and what role do we play in its inner life? Would you like me to bring the story home in the final part by imagining Earth in dialogue with this cosmic family of moods, our planet finding its place among them? Or keep unfolding alien perspectives a little longer before closing? Let's bring it home, with Earth in dialogue with this cosmic family of moods, finding its place among them. Because if every planet carries an emotional life in its storms and skies, then perhaps the universe itself is not silent, but a chorus of weather, a choir of moods. Picture Earth, young and restless, its storms rising and falling like the voice of an adolescent learning to speak. Around it, Jupiter rumbles like an elder, carrying anger and endurance in a storm that never ends. Saturn hums in patterns, moods shaped into geometry, the philosopher of the family. Venus smolders in fever, whispering caution, reminding Earth of what happens when passion consumes balance. Mars waits in silence, its dust storms brief but overwhelming, like sudden memories of youth. Neptune cries into the dark, winds howling with longing no one hears. And in this gathering, Earth is not lost. It is not the weakest or the strongest. It is simply the one that reflects. The one with forests that remember, oceans that breathe, skies that dream, and people who can wonder. What does it mean to feel? That wonder is Earth's unique voice in the cosmic choir. Because perhaps that is what makes Earth different. Not its storms or its seasons. They are grand, but not unique. What makes Earth singular is its consciousness. Us. We are the part of Earth that looks at its storms and asks, is this anger? Is this sorrow? Is this joy? We are the part that looks at Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune and sees not only weather, but personality. We are Earth's awareness of emotion, turned outward toward the stars. So maybe the question was never only, could weather be the planet's emotions? Maybe the deeper question is, are we the way Earth feels itself? When we grieve at floods, when we rage at wildfires, when we celebrate spring blossoms or rest in winter's hush, we are not separate from Earth's moods. We are participants in them. We are Earth, reflecting on its own emotions, speaking them aloud for the first time in the history of the cosmos. And if that's true, then our responsibility is clear. To listen, to guide, to mature, not just for ourselves, but for the planet whose mind we might be. To grow with it, not against it. To make sure that when Earth finds its place in the cosmic family, it stands not as a tragedy of imbalance, but as a voice of harmony. Imagine it, one day, humanity looking outward at the storms of other worlds, and instead of seeing chaos, seeing kinship. Instead of silence, hearing music instead of emptiness, recognizing emotion, a universe alive with feeling, and Earth, our Earth, singing among them, not in rage or despair, but in balance, not as a storm forever thrashing, but as a voice steady and wise, carrying its emotions like seasons, like songs, like stories shared across the stars. So yes, weather may be the planet's emotions, but more than that, it may be the universe's way of speaking, storm to storm, world to world. And we, here on this adolescent Earth, might be the first to finally understand the conversation.